morning, boys and girls, and welcome to Let's Get Cooking. My name is Miss Jeannie, and I work at the Community Library in Salem, Wisconsin. And I'm so glad that you joined me today. And also to all of those of you that are young at heart, I know that there's a few that are enjoying this that are maybe on the older side. So that's been fun to hear about. Well, today we're making applesauce snack cake, and it's a wonderful fall treat, especially if you like things that are a little spicy and maybe warm. You can serve it with ice cream or whipped cream. I thought it might be a fun Thanksgiving type dessert, and maybe you boys and girls can make it ahead of time and bring it to your Thanksgiving dinner table this year. And I have my items here ready to go today, and so I'm going to go ahead and start with that. Before I do though, I just want to mention that the recipe comes from a book called the Complete Cookbook for Young Chefs. And I didn't bring the book home, but I do have a picture of it here. And it's an additional book that I've enjoyed using for young people that are looking to cook, because they have some fun, not only easy and nutritious and tasty things for you to bake and cook, but it also has some fun tricks and for young hands. And so there was one that I'm going to talk about today, and it's something I learned myself. So I have my items here, and the first thing I did is I preheated my oven to 325, and I made sure my rack inside of my oven was in the middle. Most of the time when we bake inside our ovens, we do use the middle. And most of us have our rack in the middle all the time. But if you have large crock pots or something, you may find that the rack has been moved lower. So make sure you bring it up and put it in the middle, very middle of your oven. All right, so we preheated the oven. It calls for a stick of butter. It actually calls for 8 tablespoons of butter, and if you remember from one of our previous shows, we talked about the fact that a stick of butter actually shows you how many tablespoons are in it. And so 1 stick of butter has 8 tablespoons, or 1/2 cup. So this recipe calls for 1/2 cup of butter, or 8 tablespoons, which is 1 stick of butter. So I melted my butter already, and you should too. So the first thing we want to do is have our butter ready to go. It's so much easier for young hands to stir if you're putting butter in a recipe if it's melted. But not all recipes call for melted. This one does though. So we have it preheated. We also have our butter ready to go, and then the next thing we're going to talk about is the pan we're going to cook in. And this is a square pan. Mine is plastic, but it is able to be put in the oven. You might have a metal one, and this is an 8-inch square pan. All right, and so this is the trick. When I first read it, I thought, wow, I didn't know what it meant to put a sleeve inside your pan. And so they suggest you take a piece of tin foil, and this is about the size, which is about the size, I thought, of 2 of my top stovetop cooking area. So we take our pan, and this is what's called putting a sleeve in it. And you take your tin foil and you place it inside your pan. And just very carefully put it in, making sure that the sides are also pretty even on both sides. And then we're going to bend it over a little so you can see when we go to pour it in. Now I like to prep this ahead of time so it's ready to go when our mix is ready. All right, and then it says to spray or butter your pan. And do you know why we do that? It's for helping it not stick, right? And so if you have a spray, you can spray your inside of your tin foil here, and or you can do like I do. I don't have a spray. I use butter. And so what I do is I actually take a piece of a napkin and I break off a little piece of butter and I just wipe it on the inside of my pans when it calls for greasing a pan. And you want to do that too. So you're going to do a little bit on the bottom and a little bit on the sides. And so boys and girls, what do you think the reasoning behind the sleeve is going to be? Well, if you said to help it not stick, you're right. Because the sleeve is actually going to allow us to lift it out after it's cooked and set it on a tray to cool down. And so if you don't want to use a sleeve, you could just butter or spray a pan and then use a knife and go all the way around. But we can talk about that a little later when it's ready to go. But this book said, let's try a sleeve. So we went ahead and did that. So that's ready. And now we're going to add some of our ingredients. I did get mine ready so that we could go fairly quickly here. We're going to start with our dry ingredients. And before I start adding the flour, I did want to mention that one of the things I did prep as well is I took 2 tablespoons of sugar and a half a teaspoon of cinnamon and a 1/4 a teaspoon of nutmeg, and I put it in here and I stirred it around with a spoon. And this is going to be what we do at the very end before we bake, and that's going to be the top of our cake. So it's going to be a little sugary and spicy on the very top. So instead of having like a frosting, it's going to have a little sugar and spices on top. All right, so let's go ahead and start. We're going to put 1.5 cups of flour in our pan. And I have my flour right here. I just get the all-purpose flour, all right? And then the next dry ingredient is going to be sugar. And it says 2/3 cup sugar. So this is 1/3. And now I'm going to grab another third. All right. So put that back and this one back. And then it asks for a teaspoon of baking soda. This is what baking soda looks like. And just another little trick that I do is once you open it, you want to put the date on it if it's brand new. And then I slip this inside a Ziploc bag, a little lunch baggie to keep it fresh on the shelf where I keep it, because I don't really use it real often. So, all right, so here's my teaspoon of baking soda. So we added that, and now we're going to need a half a teaspoon of salt. So here's a half a teaspoon of salt. And we are going to need a half a teaspoon of cinnamon. sure smells good. All right, half a teaspoon of cinnamon. And then 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. All right. So I believe that's all our dry. So we're going to go ahead and stir this up. Want to get it all stirred up and the spices all distributed well inside our dry ingredients. Look at that. I guess that's why we wear our aprons, right? So we can, hopefully it goes on our apron when it flies out all over, right? All right, so we have our dry ingredients in here. And then we're going to add a cup of applesauce. Remember, this is called the Applesauce Snack Cake. So I used a chunky applesauce, but you can use a fine applesauce. And this is a non-sweetened applesauce. So we add our applesauce. And then our butter. And remember, this was 8 tablespoons of butter. So we're going to pour that in here. It's a little warm still, but that's okay. We don't want it like steamy hot, but being warm is all right. All right, and then we're going to put our apple juice in. And so I have also an unsweetened applesauce, and it calls for 1/4 of a cup of applesauce. Now, if you don't have applesauce and you have apple cider, that would work too. So you could use apple cider. What do you think would happen if you tried apple cider instead of juice? If you said it might be a little bit more spicy or rich, you were right. It would be. Applesauce is a little more plain than probably a cider would be. So we put that in, and then we're going to put an egg. 1 egg in. And I mentioned this before, but I usually put a napkin under my egg so that I can easily clean that up. All right, and then we're going to add a teaspoon of vanilla. This is what vanilla looks like. And I realized I don't have a lot left, so I've definitely got to pick up some more vanilla for the holidays, because almost everything calls for vanilla when you're making cookies and cake, especially for the holidays. So we're going to put a teaspoon of vanilla in that. My teaspoon here is actually 1 teaspoon, and then the top would be 1 1/2. So when you see me use it and it looks a little light, it's because I'm using a bottom line in here, which works. All right, so that is done. So we have used all the ingredients that are seen here, and then what do you think we do next? If you said stir, you are right. So we're going to stir this all up really well. And you can use a mixer if you'd like, but since the butter is melted, it actually stirs up pretty well. The recipe does say to whisk it. You could do that. Do you remember what we talked about, a whisk last month? And that is a different tool that you can also use. And I'll show you what mine looks like. This is what a whisk looks like. So you could try this. I decided, just because I tend to not like to make much dishes, And because some recipes will tell you to use a bowl for your dry ingredients and a bowl for your wet ingredients, and then add them all together. I tend to, if I can, and because I made this before, I know that I can do it this way. I can do dry and then just add the more liquid ingredients into one pan. And I'm just using the one spoon here for stirring, and it also works as a good, it scrapes the sides really good. It's called a spatula, and it's going to help me with putting it into a pan. All right, so it looks pretty good, and it smells good too. So we're going to add this to our pan. Here's our pan, and I can tell that there's no flour left, that it's been stirred well, and it doesn't take very long. Matter of fact, this cake didn't take very long to put together, as long as you have all your ingredients ready. So get that. The spatula helps get everything off the sides too. All right, so we're going to smooth it in here into the corners and try to make it as even as possible when we put it in a pan like this. We don't want it too tall in the middle or on the sides. We want it evenly distributed. All right, looks pretty good. And sometimes you can even shake it a little bit to make sure it gets all the way to the side. You can take a spoon or your finger if you'd like. Since I used an egg, I'm pretty careful about not eating raw egg, and you should be too. If there's egg inside of a recipe, you should be just a little careful. Eggs are great, but they are even better after they're cooked. So, all right, so we're all ready, and this is what it looks like. All right, and then I'm going to take my topping, and I'm just going to shake it on top. Try to get it evenly distributed. And you can taste it too. See what you think. And if you're not a big fan of like the cinnamon and nutmeg, you can always go a little lighter, or even just sprinkle the top with sugar. But you definitely want to put the seasonings in the inside of the cake. All right, so it looks like this. So I'm making sure it's all ready, and I'm going to put it in the oven now. In the middle. And we are going to set our timer for 30 minutes. Let's see here. Well, it says like 35 to 40 minutes. 35 to 40 minutes. So let's start with 35 minutes. And at 35 minutes, I'll check it, and I'll use a toothpick like this, and I'm going to, at 35 minutes, pull it out and take a look at it. I'm going to put a toothpick in the very middle. Maybe some of you have done this before. And very carefully pull it out. If it seems to be kind of wet, or it actually pulls up some of the inside of the cake, you want to carefully pull it up, and you know you need to keep baking it for at least another 5 minutes. See, all our ovens are a little bit different sometimes in the way they heat up. So what we're really looking for is we don't want to burn it for sure, and we don't want to pull it out when it's not done all the way either. So I use a toothpick as a tool, And if I can put it in the center and pull it out and it's perfectly clean, I know it's done. All right, I'll see you in a few minutes. All right, we're back. Our cake has come out of the oven. As you can see, the sleeve is on this is a rack. It was inside the pan and it easily picked up, and I placed it here. It has been sitting here for a couple minutes now. And you know how I talked about the toothpick? Boys and girls, if you don't have a toothpick, you can use a knife. A knife does the same job. What you'll do is you put it in the very middle and you slide it down and bring it on up. And like you can see, it's completely clean. When I pulled this out and checked on it at 35 minutes, my toothpick did have some cake still on it, so I knew it needed to cook a little longer. What I was a little surprised at is that it took a little bit longer than the 40 minutes even. It took about 42 minutes, 42, 43 minutes. And I'm wondering if it's because I used the chunky applesauce. So just a FYI, or for your information, depending on what applesauce you use, just keep an eye on it in the oven because you want it to not overcook or undercook. All right? So we easily, using the sleeve, placed it on a rack. If you don't have a wire rack like this, you can use a hot pad too, or a towel, and just let it sit for a moment or two. All right, and because mine has, I can do a few things with it. It doesn't take very long for it to cool off, just a few minutes. And as you can see, this is what it looks like. You can see a little bit of the sugar. And then I'm going to place it on my plate. Now this is always the tricky part of working with a cake, is getting it in from the pan to the plate. And since I have this sugar on top, I can't just flip it upside down, which some of you could if you wanted to. But I want to keep it looking pretty on the top, so I'm actually going to use a spatula here. And I'm going to see how easily it transfers onto my plate. Now, this is live, so let's see how this goes. It is pretty hot, so I'm going to, whoa, see it did break. Oh, bummer. Oh, wow. All right. Well, what happens when a cake breaks like that? First of all, the reason it broke is because it's too hot to move. I should have let it sit for 10-15 minutes. But the other thing is, it's still fine. It still looks great. Matter of fact, I mean, it will be fine. And I'm going to actually cut a little piece off of it right here and show you what it looks like on the inside. I could leave it on the tin foil too if I wanted to. All right. And as you can see, it's very steamy. You see that? And I mentioned that you could put Cool Whip on it or ice cream, or just serve it like this. And so I'm going to go ahead and give it a taste, even though it's a little warm, and see what I think. It's wonderful. So boys and girls, I hope you really enjoy this as well. And remember what I said about using a knife. If you've brought a pan out and you didn't use the sleeve, you can use your knife and go around it like this before trying to lift it out of your pan. So if your cake cracks like mine did, I'm going to give you a look at this. It's really not the end of the world. It's just a learning for all of us. And as you can see, it still looks beautiful. And it still tastes great. And we'll just do it maybe a little bit different. I'm not quite sure I like the sleeve idea. I think I would have, I don't know, maybe I'll try something different next time. But anyway, boys and girls, it was fun having you with, and I hope you really enjoy it and have fun making it as well as eating it and sharing it with other people in your family or your friends. And this month actually marks 1 year since we've been doing this program once a month with my cooking. Let's Get Cooking. So it's been a fun year, and I hope you've been enjoying it. If you haven't seen all of them and you're curious, you can always go to our library's website. It's communitylib.org, and you can go and click on the YouTubes that in the children's section and look at all the past videos that we've done, which has been a lot of fun. Matter of fact, last Christmas I did a Christmas cake, a strawberry Christmas cake. And just as an FYI, this is a little commercial for next month. Instead of a cake, we're actually going to do a cookie, a very large cookie. And I'm thinking you're going to have fun with it. And you can either enjoy it by eating it or saving it and giving it as a gift. And there'll be a picture right after this. Bye, boys and girls. Have a great day.